Paranormal Dimensions is a regular feature on Mondays on the Paranormal UK radio network.
This is Sasha Christie, and you're listening to the Paranormal UK Radio Network, the UK's biggest paranormal network. And this is Paranormal Dimensions with David Young.
Well, thank you for that, Sasha. Thank you for the little intro there. Right, now today, I've got a lovely man on with me. Is a clairvoyant medium named Philip Kinsella. He's quite well known and is widely acclaimed. He won a British Mediumship Award in Portsmouth in 2008, and apart from taking to platform work, he's also appeared on stage and is very much in demand for his soul survival evidence. He is also the author of numerous books, some of which have been co-authored with his identical twin brother, Ronald, who will be on the next show, who is also an author and illustrator. Apart from dozens of published articles on the paranormal, Philip has also appeared on Channel 4, Central, live TV and digital Anglian news, along with radio interviews. He has also had books published on the UFO phenomena and researched the Rendlesham Forest incident, which occurred in Suffolk, England in 1980, along with the first investigate author of the case, Brenda Butler. Philip was also credited in publishing an article concerning a revolutionary speculation with regards to the UFO problem. He is currently working on more books. Now, okay, I'm going to take no more time, but I'm going to introduce you to Philip Kinsella. Hello, Philip.
Hello, David. Thank you very much for having me on your show. I'm very delighted.
You're absolutely welcome, Philip, and it's great to have you on. I mean, as I say, I've really been looking forward to this.
Bless you.
And I really don't know how to set off. I suppose really we ought to get into how you got into all this. I mean, with your brother and everything. Did you grow up knowing you were both clairvoyant? Actually, I don't know. Is Ronald clairvoyant too?
Not really, no. I mean, as a kid, I used to have very strange experiences. I would literally, if I saw something bad happening within my mind, shockingly, I'd see it playing out later on, slightly different, but almost in the same way. If there's going to be an argument or if there was something brewing. And I thought that when I was a kid, was cursed. And I would say a little mantra that went, no, God, no, never, God, never, to try and counsel it out when I'd realised that this was happening. I didn't realise up until much later in my life that this so-called clairvoyant ability would manifest. And of course, it's a dangerous road to walk down because a lot of the general public, which are fed by the media machine, and the media machine, as you and I well know, David, don't take the subject matters of UFOs or psychic exploration in the way that people like us take it. They poo-poo it. Yeah. So the actual paranormal experiences have been with us since we were children. I'm an identical twin, and my brother is more artistic. He's an author also, but he's also very artistic. But it started when we were younger, and I remembered one episode very clearly, which happened when we were 13 years of age in 1982. When we had been with our maternal grandmother, and we used to stay with them at summer holidays and also at Christmas time and Easter. And they lived in a very big 3-story high house in Middlesex. And on this particular wonderful summer's afternoon, we were out in the back garden, me, Ronnie and Grandma, and there was a slight breeze. It was a perfect day, I suppose you'd call it, perfect blue day. And we suddenly caught sight of this silver orb that was moving through the sky towards us, and we first thought that it had been a balloon. But this silver orb was coming closer and closer, and it came over to the tree that my grandmother had at the back of the garden. Now, my grandmother was psychic, but not to the point where she would do people readings. She just knew things, and the whole family was aware of this. And while we were watching the silver orb, it was hovering over the tree. It was around the size of a football. It was perfect silver. It had no markings on it whatsoever. It made no sound. And it looked weighty. And it came over, and it hung over our grandmother's head. And as you know, kids, 13-year-olds, were like, what on earth is that? And you know, most people say, oh, you know, that didn't happen. It did. It actually happened. And there was no way of explaining what it was. Now, what was really funny was that our grandmother didn't seem fazed at all by the experience, at all. And we'd asked her what it was, and she said, well, the fairies have come to take a closer look at us. And that was her way, I think, of trying to calm the experience, the whole experience, in some kind of like way of soothing her grandsons. Well, it moved away from her head, went up to the windows to the house as though peeking through, and then disappeared. I remembered we ran into the house to go across to the other side of the house to look at it and see it disappear. Now, in those days, there were no such things as drones. My brother always called it an eye, you know, and you hear about these cases. That was the start. I remember that was the talk of the family for a very long time. So that was the initial start of this very bizarre phenomena. Yeah, that was the beginning of it. And, you know, as a kid, I remembered I was very heavily into the paranormal because I used to go to the library with my brother every Saturday morning for a few hours to do a project on the Loch Ness Monster. And I have to say, I did say to Malcolm Robinson, author investigator, that every time I hear of the Loch Ness Monster, I think of him. Yeah. And also the Roswell UFO crash. So we were very much into it then.
I did do a show with Malcolm. I don't know if you heard it. It was about,
I did hear it.
Show number 3, I think it was, yeah.
I heard it.
No, it was show number, there was the second show I did, yeah.
Yeah, I heard it. It's wonderful.
Yeah, he's an interesting fellow, Malcolm.
Brilliant man, yeah.
Yeah, I imagine that really the immediate thought would have been it was a balloon or something, wouldn't it have been, that orb you saw?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Back then.
Yeah, totally, but it was not. It was anything other than a balloon. And now, after all these years later, and researching and investigating through our own personal experiences, both my twin and I, you're finding that these objects have been well known. They were known as Foo Fighters in the Second World War. You know, they've been seen by craft. They're seen all over the world. So my investigations led me then further into that field. But of course, in those days, there wasn't much on UFOs, and especially in the media. And of course, back in the 80s, I mean, you know, we had Dr. J. Allen Hynek's the Project Blue Book. He released a book, and I had that as a paperback. As a young kid, I didn't understand most of it, but trying to absorb the scientific information in there was quite hard. But this eventually led on to an experience, to quite a traumatic experience that had occurred in the winter of 1989. And this is moving to when I was, around 20, and that happened in the small village of Marston Mortain, in the winter of 1989, and that is what then actually led me to believe that we were dealing with something that goes beyond the physical nuts and bolts aspect of what we call ufology, because I had an experience then that changed my whole idea of reality, as we call it. And since that day, I've been investigating and trying to understand what this is all about. Do you want me to go into that episode, David?
Yeah, sure. I'd love to hear about it, yeah.
I mean, people, you know, raise their eyebrows sometimes when you say you've seen a UFO, and, you know, I understand that. But the experience is very different when you see one. And my twin brother and I recently saw 3 of them back in on the 9th of April 2016, and thankfully have been recorded by my niece in a neighbouring village, but that's another story.
That's interesting.
Yeah, and Jason Gleaves analysed the footage, and they're unknown. But what happened in 1989 was that we lived in a small cul-de-sac, very quiet area, and it wasn't that far from a church called St Mary's Church. Whether or not our property then lay on the ley line, I'm not really sure. But my brother and I shared a downstairs room, a study and a bedroom. It was quite large. And we had a downstairs shower room and the hall and the kitchen and the conservatory and out into the garden. I come back from work, and I would have got back from the train for about 7, maybe 7:15. And I got into the house, and our dog Benji, we had a dog then called Benji, my sister and my brother were in the house. They were the only ones in there. And I came in through the door and walked through to the hall, to the kitchen. And, you know, we're just talking, doing bits and pieces, having a coffee while I was in the kitchen. And all of a sudden, the atmosphere in the room changed. It was like an electrical current that going through the room. And you could sense this. It was like a build-up of static. And I know that a lot of people who experience very strange paranormal episodes go through this change in the atmosphere. It becomes electric. And all of a sudden, my brother, who was standing to my left and away from the open door to the hall, seemed to go in what I can only call as a trance. And as this static energy was building, our dog started to growl. And my brother said, there's going to be an earthquake or Grandma's going to die. And he said this by looking up. It was almost as if he'd been possessed by something. He doesn't know why he said what he said afterwards, but this is what came out of his mouth. There's going to be an earthquake or Grandma's going to die. Well, our grandmother wasn't dead, and there certainly was no earthquake. At that exact moment, through the hall, because we had frosted glass windows to the hall, a very bright white light was coming up to the door of the house and the window to the house. It's all frosted. And I thought it was a car coming up the driveway to our drive. But this light got brighter and brighter. And what it was doing, incredulously, was bending the glass to the door. So while my brother was going in this trance, the glass was bending backwards and forwards as though something was penetrating through it. And my mind at that point was thinking, I don't understand what's happening. I was getting more and more frantic. The dog started to bark, and I really didn't understand what the hell was going on. And incredulous as it may seem, my sister was to the far left. She heard the dog, she saw Ronnie, but she didn't see what happened next because they weren't in the area of where this happened. But the only way I can describe was this small entity about 3 foot tall, clad in black, with what I assumed was some type of helmet that seemed bigger than its body. It literally walked through the glass that seemed like jelly or bending and ran into our downstairs bedroom / study. And everything returned to normal. At this point, the dog is really going for it. Benji's really barking. And the hairs on the back of my neck are coming up. And I reach behind me in the drawer and I pull out a knife, the biggest knife I can find. And I said, there's an intruder in the house. And then I said even louder, there's an intruder in the house. And at that point, this thing ran from the small room downstairs very quickly. So the dog, I mean, you have to be there to understand it. It's really quite frightening. The dog was really barking and yelping and distressed, and it ran up the stairs and disappeared. So we searched the house. There was nothing at all. So if you try to put yourself in that situation, and this was all the way back in 1989, and nothing quite like that has happened ever again. You try to explain to people what happened. I couldn't tell you. If you said to someone, I saw this grey type thing that looked, now I realise could have been one, all dressed in black, walk through the glass of your front door from some light, they'd just laugh themselves into the ground.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
But that wasn't the end of it, because I then experienced something even more bizarre. That particular, what I can only assume was the early hours of the morning, where I found myself waking up and on my back, levitating, and I was being pulled, and it was dark, from my room. And I woke up in the hall and being pulled through the kitchen doors to the house and thinking, how on earth am I able to get through the walls and doors of my house? It was as though it's like some out-of-body experience.
Yeah, I was just about to say that. Would it have been an out-of-body? But sorry, interrupting.
Yeah, no, you go ahead, David. Anyone would, or like some people say, sleep paralysis or something. But no. I was being pulled through the hall to the kitchen, through the conservatory, out to the back garden. And all along I'm thinking to myself, well, how am I able to pass through doors? How am I able to go through them? And this thought was in my mind primarily because I was not in control of where I was going. Something else was in control. And as I came out to the back garden, I was lifted up. It was dark and I could see all these UFOs going through the sky and thinking at that point, my goodness, they're real. they're real, and my mind is fighting to try and bring control to myself, because I know that I'm being forcibly removed somehow from where I have been in my bedroom stroke study out here. And as I focus upon these UFOs moving through the sky, there is one particular one that's not moving. And as soon as I fix my attention upon it, I'm lifted up, I can feel my stomach going, and I'm pulled towards it, then I black out. And then the next episode is the one where I suffered, unfortunately, through media, degradation, I suppose, in some way, because what happened then was that I again woke and I was disorientated. I didn't know where I was. And I found myself strapped to some type of bed, but not a bed that you would think. It felt more like a solid, hard bed. The room was very dark. It was very hot. It was like being in a sauna. And I remembered waking up thinking, where on earth am I? And then feeling the shock and horror of what was going on, because I then found, rather embarrassingly, that there was a device that had been placed into the lower anatomy. I don't need to go into detail. And I could feel it within my stomach, like it was pulsating. And as I turned to my right, there were these three tall, I don't know, I can explain it as like reptilians. It sounds ridiculous, but that's the only thing I could define in terms of reality. They were moving backwards and forwards in this very strange stance through this mist. And I started to scream and yell, and I wanted them to take this thing out of me. And if I can just explain to you that the fear, the total fear and degradation of that moment is something that, or it's all very well explaining it on radio, but the actual emotions and the actual experience was very horrific. And as I screamed and yelled, it was as though I was just a rat lab. They weren't interested in me whatsoever. However, this small grey, I'd call it grey, first time I'd seen one, shocked me because it came forward and it was more cream than grey, and the thing was retracted out of my lower part. And I was ordered to sit up and to dress. It was very cold. It didn't have any empathy. But I was grateful to it, because I felt from an empathic level that it had released the mechanisms around my legs and my arms, and this thing had gone, retracted across the floor. So I did as this thing commanded. I dressed, and I was ordered to follow it towards this wall, what I thought was a wall, until the wall disappeared, and I found that we were up some height, and I assumed at that point we were still in the craft and we were still above the village, but it was becoming morning. And this is where it gets really cranky, because I found myself seeing another craft by the conservatory lower down, and I thought, oh my God, what on earth is going on here? You know, I've just been taken from my house. I'm up in this thing. I've had this most terrifying experience, and this grey type creature is now asking me that I need to exit. Well, I'm thinking, well, how the hell do I exit? Does it expect me to just walk out of this opening? Well, the next thing I knew was there were two other greys with me, and we're coming down to the ground. I'm told not to look at them, but my main focus attention on the last part of this experience that I'm very quickly going through is that this other UFO that was smaller had this other grey underneath it, standing in front of me. Now, the other two greys that told me not to look at them had obviously cleared off. They'd just gone. But this one in front of me was the most shocking. I felt violated and totally degraded. I didn't understand what had happened to me. I didn't know where I was in terms of my mind, or what. You're going through these experiences in your mind thinking, this is really happening to me, yet I want proof. I need proof. So this grey standing in front of me is about 4 foot tall. He's more human looking than grey, but still grey, if you know what I mean. He was stocky, well built, in a one-piece uniform, knee-length high boots. I can still see him now. His chin came into a point at the end, but he wore this stupid hat on his head, pointed hat that came underneath his craft, and he's got his arms folded across his chest, and he's looking at me. He's looking at me really angrily, like, and I could feel this real anger in him. I don't know what I'd done, and I thought,
what would you have done?
I don't know. I've got no idea. This is the thing. And I thought, how dare you? I wanted to punch him, but because I couldn't get to him, I was not able to move. I was still in this kind of like control or whatever it was. So I thought, I need proof. I need something. So the only thing that came to my mind was, how the hell am I able to get through locked and bolted doors? I mean, how are you able to do that? And I knew that if he could give me the answer to that, I'd crack it. I'd crack the code. I'd crack it all. But he looked at me, David, and his mouth went to an O, and he started to talk in this electronic rasp, and I found myself rushing back through the doors to the conservatory, through to the doors to the kitchen, through to the doors to the downstairs study bedroom, and bang, I was back in my body. As soon as I came back in there, I had a nosebleed on my right nostril, and I got up, and it was very difficult for me to walk around and move. Now, what's really interesting about this is that my brother and I, my twin and I, found 3 triangular marks that were prominent and were behind my right ear. And we tried, do you remember the old Polaroid cameras?
Yeah.
Yeah, we tried to take a picture of it. The picture wouldn't come out. So I had 3 triangular marks behind my right ear. I've got 3 marks that I still have on my right arm that burn. And I also kept having nosebleeds to the right nostril, to the right nostril, the area here. And of course, in those days, who was I going to go to? Go to a doctor and say, oh, you know, I've been raped by aliens and whatever. They'll just laugh you all the way to the leads. But I'm not so interested in what happened to me, although I will never forget the experience. What's interesting is the fact of how what we call the abduction happened, and my research into further investigations into the abduction phenomena, which kind of like tied in with soul survival, being a medium now, which was very strange, and integrating these parts, because we've always looked at the UFO phenomena and the psychic phenomena and cryptozoology and all these different areas into different boxes. But I've been trying for a long time now, trying to piece the bits together. But just going back very quickly with regards to the ear, now, a couple of years ago, I think now, maybe a couple of years, I had some problems with my right ear. I've always known there was something in there, in my right ear. And I went to the doctors for them to have a look at it. And when I went to the doctors, the local surgery up the road from us, one of the doctors got their device out and was having a look, and then another look in my right ear, and then another look, and I'm sitting there thinking, what are they looking at? And so I didn't go in there specifically for them to find anything in that. That's not it. I wanted to go because every time I took a shower, there always seemed, or when I'm asleep, there seems like there's water logged in there. It feels uncomfortable. So anyway, she said, hold on a minute, I need to go and get another doctor. So she went off and got another doctor, and this other doctor came down, and then this other doctor started having a look in my ear and poking around and having a look. So they were talking to each other, and I thought, my God, have I got something? Is there a cancer in my ear? Is there something?
Yeah, kind of let me know what's going on, yeah.
So, well, they said, well, it doesn't look like it's cleared up. They said there's a crystalline structure in there. It's very bizarre. Well, anyway, they left it at that. And anyway, the doctor that I saw, she knows I'm a medium. She doesn't know about the UFO stuff. And she said, I've got to ask you a question, she said. Have you been abducted by aliens? Well, David, I went back to the car worse than when I went into the doctor's.
Yeah, I would imagine you would do, yeah.
I mean, well, and they left it.
And this left it on that?
They left it. This is not the first time I've gone about my ear. They left it. And I went back to the car, and I thought, well, that's very odd. If there's something that still looks like it's healing and there's a crystalline structure, wouldn't you send me to the hospital to have it looked at or x-rayed?
Yeah. And especially to come out with that, have you been abducted?
Yeah, I swear to God. I mean, I do not lie, and what's really interesting is that not long ago, probably about a month ago, I was just resting and I felt something moving in there, and it felt like there was something moving in there, and I could feel it. I'm not claiming that I've got a tracker or device or implant. But there's a part of my mind that thinks, no, I don't want it touched. I want it left, David, because I've heard these stories of people having them removed, and then they feel like they've lost something.
Yeah, I've heard that before too. Yeah.
Has it helped me? I don't know. Is it a tracker? I'd rather it left in.
Yeah, is it something that's helping you? You mean? Yeah.
It's possible, but I'm going to tell you now. I'm absolutely convinced that what happened back in 1989 had something to do with the right ear and something being placed there. Because I've always had something in the back of my mind that something is there. So this is where my investigations led me then into really serious investigating the truth, not the lies or the disinformation or the sensationalism or the ego, the truth. However bizarre and however hard it is for people to accept what I went through, because I knew that I was going to be in for a tough time with this, I thought this is possibly an abduction, and it's done out of body, that's still connected to the body. And this is where my theoretical model of the abduction phenomena came in.
Cool.
With regards to that. So this is where it led me in terms of the investigation and the research, in terms of what people call greys, and the abduction phenomena, how the abduction happens, why it is that people go through wars and doors. They have a sense of timelessness.
The thing I found, the thing I found interesting when you were talking about the greys was the connection with the reptilians as well. They seem to work together at times. I've heard that several times from people. You know, you'd think that being two different races of aliens, if you like, that they would be separate and not being working together, but they seem to work together.
Totally, and I don't understand, because the thing is, think about this. I mean, back then in 1989, you were considered absolute crazy if you even suggested that you've had some form of abduction. I know that Jenny Randall's got in touch with my twin and I about it. That was many years ago. But if you told anyone that you'd been in the presence of what you thought were reptilians, I mean, you'd be laughed all the way to the lead. Yeah. But what's interesting is that I do believe, after all these years of trying to deny it myself, not in terms of what happened to me, but denying the existence of reptilians, as people call them, I'm not so sure. I mean, they didn't communicate with me. In fact, their whole mannerism suggested I was nothing more than a piece of meat to them. It was the grey, the cream-coloured grey that I saw that had a little bit more empathy, I guess, more understanding, but not on a human level. I guess that was me feeling that, because it seemed to release me and ordered me to dress, and it was ready to remove me from this negative experience, or this very negative situation that I've been involved in. But this then led into the sphere of the soul, and the greys, which seemed like clones, and they can't reproduce. And of course, I started to really think long and hard about, putting the pieces together. The greys can't reproduce. They seem like they're clones. They don't understand about human emotions or empathy or love or colour or taste. They seem to be devoid of that. And I know that there is the contention that they may be androids or robots. I'm not dismissing that fact. But what I'm saying is that they're very interested in our human physiology and also our psychology as well. They seem to be masters at mind reading. They seem to be masters at very much ahead of themselves in terms of communicating and controlling humans through the use of their eyes, their mind. Now, I then wrote a book called Believe, Bridging the Gap Between the Psychic and UFO Phenomena, which then was led on with Sky Crash throughout time, because I know that I teamed up with Brenda and I was doing a lot of investigations in Rendlesham Forest, which was the UK's #1 Roswell. Then I wrote a book called A Passage to Eternity, which kind of like highlighted upon the theoretical model of what the greys could, and only say could represent. It's only a theory. Because we as humans, when we think about it, we only think that we live and then we die and that's it. But I'm of the firm conviction that the human soul survives death. And this is something that led me into more areas of the greys, because they're interested in reproduction, human reproduction, hybridization, yet they can't reproduce. And this is where I kind of like thought, what are they up to? What are they after? What do they want? And it was in 1996, I believe, where I had my first ever download. You've heard of downloads?
Yeah. Is it much like because Brenda gets downloads, doesn't it? Brenda Butler we're talking about for Rendlesham. I believe Brenda gets downloads, much like the Jim Penniston experience as well.
Yes, it was the only one time that I had what they would call a download. And if I may explain to the listeners what that feels like, it's almost like a knowing. At 1 minute I was at work, and I don't know, thinking about because I'm always thinking, I'm a thinker, I can't stop thinking. I'm thinking about UFOs, I'm thinking about psychic, I'm thinking about the stuff and trying to put the pieces together for the truth, for the ultimate truth of what we're dealing with. And on this particular day, I can't remember what day, but it was in 1996, I had this download, and it was like a complete vision of everything. I knew it. I had to grab a piece of paper and a pen, and I started furiously scribbling this formula down. And what I was getting was that the information that came through was that the Greys were clone souls, that they had cloned themselves from their original masters. They could no longer reproduce, and that they were abducting people because they were working on a hybridization program to try and create some form of gestation for their cloned souls or spark of consciousness to connect back to where we go to, the original copies went to. So that was published in Alien Encounters. That came out in a magazine called Alien Encounters back in the late 90s that was quite popular. They published that, and they considered it revolutionary, but that's not where it ended, because the journey of this UFO quest got even stranger.
If it could, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's like walking down halls of smoke and mirrors, which it led me into, the Rendlesham case, and we were doing a lot of research and investigations under the recommendation of the brilliant and lovely Peter Robbins, who my brother and I and Susan had the esteemed pleasure of meeting many years ago.
Yeah, he's a lovely man, Peter.
Wonderful.
Unfortunately, he's been sort of really kicked in the nuts by somebody, but unfortunately, unfortunately, he feels such a waste, which I told him it's silly, because he's much appreciated in the UFO world, and
we've told him to. He knows that anyway. But he suggested going out there, so which we did, Ronnie, Susan, and myself, and we did a lot of experiments out there, because we knew that there was something going on. And it's like the areas of in America, Skinwalker Ranch, you have these particular areas in around the world that have UFO activity, but also seem to have a lot of paranormal experiences around that area, like orbs and all these different things. So we did an experiment, and I will tell you, for the record, which has been documented, on the 8th of June in 1998, we had seen a huge triangular object with a circular appendage in the farmer's field, to be correct, just outside one perimeter of the forest. And this had been done where we'd done this experiment at home a week before we went back to the forest. We'd sent our intentions out through meditation, and we'd asked them to show themselves to us. We really wanted to see them. We would take no camera equipment at all. We wanted this to be a personal experience. So the date was the 8th of June in 1998 that we went there to see if they would turn up. And we'd gone into the forest, into the field. We used to hook up where we normally do. And it was getting dark, and of course you can't be seen by the farmer that's across the field, because he's known for firing off guns sometimes just to scare people off. So I got some dowsing rods, and I doused into the area of the field. Now at this time, half the field was crop and half was just like barren land. And I found a place that I thought was the area where the original UFO came originally. I can't be sure of that, because at that point I didn't really have a lot of information about what had happened with regards to Rendlesham until I met with Brenda some years later. But we found the spot, and both Ronald, Susan, a good friend of ours, Susan, and myself sat in this circle and meditated. And it was a lovely night. The stars were out. There was a full moon. And this was roughly around about, I think, 9:45 at night we'd meditated. Now, we come out of the meditation. I mean, who would have believed it if anyone's seen these three people sitting in the middle of this field at this time of night? And we got up, and we thought, well, we had a look around, and we saw this red light, and it was coming from the farmer's what we thought was the farmer's house. And it was coming towards us, and we thought, oh my God, the farmer's seen us. He's got in his car and he's coming across the field. We started to run back, and I stopped, and I turned back round, and I found that it wasn't a car. Car lights aren't red, and it was moving towards us. And then it shot straight across the field so fast, and we thought, wow, that was amazing. What the hell was that? We thought that was it. We thought that was it until there was a flash of light from the other side of the field where these trees were. And the only way I can explain it to you was that there was this triangular, it's like a pyramid. It flashed, it appeared, and there was a gap and a circular undercarriage underneath it. And it made no sound. It was brilliant colour of white and different colours emanating from the inside of the triangle. And the circular undercarriage was moving one way. It was like a clock. You know, we get a clock, one moving one way and the other moving the other. So the triangle was moving around in a circle one way, and the circular appendage with blue lights around its central hub was moving the other. Well, that was it. I started to run towards it. And, and I ran across the field. I remembered my jeans getting soaked. This was the holy grail for me. It was the most strangest and yet beautiful thing I'd ever seen in my life. I didn't stop to think at that point, because I was confirming, shouting back, tell me it's triangular, tell me this circular appendage, because I was trying to confirm with the others who were running after me that is what we were seeing. Well, the closer I got, I mean, it was incredible. And then I remembered I got under it, and then it just went out, like someone had turned some lights off, and I slipped, fell. I took in a load of dirt in my mouth. I spat it out, and I then started to, I cried and I laughed. I cried, I laughed, because I thought, who on earth is going to believe us?
It's like an elation or something, yeah.
Well, it got even stranger, David, because we talked nothing about this, and, you know, we kept talking about it over and over again. It was the most incredible thing. Now, I can't be sure if it was UFO magazine, David. It was one, I'm sure it was. And I spoke to a person called Bream Forbes. His name, and however I tried to spell this name, the man on the other end wasn't very accommodating. It's like, and I remembered Bream Forbes. And he said, this is the next day, because I didn't sleep, I didn't eat, I was still on a high. Beautiful day, the next day. Can you send me everything? Pictures, anything you have, which we did. I packaged it, sent it to the magazine, and nothing back. And when I phoned the magazine back up and asked for this editor, they said they don't have anyone here of that name. Now, I don't, and they said the editor said he'd send everything to Peter Robbins, and I hadn't mentioned Peter Robbins at all. I mean, he didn't know that we had met him, but of course we do now. Bless his heart.
Yeah,
but that was very bizarre. Yeah, and that was one of the. And then, of course, that's where I met Brenda Butler. I didn't know where she was in the world. I was out there doing investigations again. And I said, I'd really love to meet Brenda Butler on that very night that we were investigating. Who do you think we met? We met Brenda Butler, who was out. Yeah.
She spends a lot of time up there still.
Yeah. And then we teamed together, and then we wrote the book Sky Crash Throughout Time, a continued investigation to the Rendlesham UFO mystery, which Keppelbaum brought out in 2013, I believe. And that was more to do with her, a lot of what Brenda was involved in, and the sightings before and afterwards. So that's where that project led. So you can see, David, that, you know, I seem to be being pulled into this.
You certainly do, yeah. It's,
with the most bizarre things that have ever happened. Yeah, it's incredible.
And connecting that with your clairvoyant life, when did that all start in real childhood, or do you think there's something has enhanced that through maybe your implant in your ear?
David, all I can tell you is that I'm not putting things together and saying this is exactly how it happened. It's possible that, you know, and I know that we had some very strange things happen to us as kids anyway. And, you know, I believe that thinking about this, it's not like, oh, look at me, I'm special. And no. I've never been like that. I've been more of a curious person. I've always tried to find out how things work and putting things together. But the clairvoyant ability activated in 1999. But I believe that it's been with me since a child, because you read a lot of these stories, and I've read a lot of books about a lot of mediums and how brilliant they are and all the rest of it. But really, I wrote a book called Reaching for the Divine, which was my first published book, which dealt with the psychic phenomena, and trying to explain the process of how that works, and explaining also that mediums do have their problems through communication. I mean, discarnate communication is not one of the easiest things for anyone to do. But again, I remembered seeing a brilliant medium called Pearl that I for the very first time in my life, when my grandmother had passed over, and she said to me that you've had UFO experiences, and she said you've had an encounter with a group of them. And I was shocked, and she said to me, you're going to be a medium. This was back in 1997, I think, roughly around there. I can't remember the exact date. And I thought, she said, you're going to make a connection between the UFO and psychic phenomena. And I thought, well, what connection is that? She said, it'll come to you. So at that point, I realized that as individuals, as souls, as ourselves, we're all important, and that we're all connected, and that I believe that there is life after death. I believe that the continuation of consciousness. I believe also, David, that there are other interdimensional entities accessing our field of dimension.
Absolutely, yeah.
They are very interested in us as a species. Could this be some form of past life connection? Could this be some spiritual connection? Are there, as Kathleen Marden quite beautifully put, a faction of rogue greys? I did like that. As there are rogue humans, you don't know. So this is where this has led me, not just into the UFO field, but also the psychic investigations. And the really, really cranky part is that people like to keep them separate. They like to deal with the UFO department on its own, and they like to deal with the psychic department on its own. And I know there's a few other researchers as well who were doing this, trying to combine the two together, trying to connect the dots together. And this, so that's where that led me in terms of my research with regards to that, David. Yeah.
Yeah, like a few years ago, like I said on a few other programs, I couldn't see any connections with spiritualism and UFOs and everything.
No.
But it's only over the last few years that I've sort of kind of started thinking there's something in this, with when you hear about the reptilians and the greys and
oh yes,
and interdimensional beings and everything else. I really do think it is all connected, like you do.
Yeah, it's like, how are they able to access our dimension? I mean, what makes me laugh is that scientists think they've got to do it our way. They may have found a completely different way. They may have found a way of extending their consciousness without using bodies. Yeah. They may be able to project themselves like the military, the secret military elite have been doing with remote viewing. I mean, because the way that I see it, when I met Dr. David Jacobs in Arizona, I mean, his research is faultless as well. He believes that they're here to repopulate the planet. I'm not disputing that. But from my perspective, I thought, no, they're interested in reproduction for a particular reason. And the reason is because I believe that they have lost themselves through the act of cloning, and that they are trying to reintroduce themselves back into creation, because from my perspective, certain faction of greys, not all of them, may have lost themselves to this form of cloning. And we have to think on an empathic level. For instance, if I was to clone you, David, 1,000,000 times in a laboratory, you yourself, the natural process of reproduction, you've come through the correct channel, memories from a spirit world, memories from past, future, whatever. Your clones will only have the memory, one single imprint of one single life, one single memory, so that when those physical clones die, my hypothesis is, if this happened to the greys, that spark of consciousness may have amalgamated itself as one mind hive consciousness on a different level of reality, and that they found a world that can reproduce because they're interested in reproduction. And it's possible that they want to propel themselves back to where we go to, or it could even be that there's a bigger part to this that we're not really yet aware of. And we're still looking for that. And I'm not saying that my theory is set. No, I'm open to all forms of theoretical debate, whether it's us from the future, which quite possibly could be us from the future, and we've mucked up, and now we're coming back to try and salvage what we can, or, there could be advanced biomechanical machines that have been sent as scouts across the universe to investigate us. I mean, all these things have to be looked at.
Definitely, yeah. I mean, in your clairvoyant evenings, do the aliens ever pop up in your...
No.
No? Does that become a separate thing, or...?
I believe it's separate, and that's something that's quite interesting. I mean, I'm dealing with survival evidence more times than not, 5 days a week. I'm dealing with dead all the time. So, but not once. No, I don't get, a grey popping up.
Yeah, that's kind of what
like
you think, because if all these things, I mean, everything's a living, you think if something dies and it's alien or human or whatever, you think that these things would all come together and in the afterlife, wouldn't you?
What is interesting, though, definitely, absolutely, definitely. But what's also interesting, David, is that as a clairvoyant medium, I see orbs around people. They come in different colours. They're very, very bright. Now, what do UFOs come as? Lights, different coloured lights, but they're much, much more intense. They're much more overwhelming. So I do believe that when we're dealing with the dead and we're dealing with UFOs, they're operating on slightly different vibrations of reality.
Yeah.
They're probably coming into our dimension in ways that we could probably not even believe. So I'm absolutely of the firm conviction that we're dealing with interdimensional entities as opposed to physical entities. Because that's the only way they can get through to us. I'm not saying that applies to every UFO encounter. I'm talking in terms of the greys here, and not all of them. As I said, we have different species of humans. We have rogue humans. We have good humans. Why would it be any different for like the greys, for example? Because they have always maintained their physiology in terms of their 3 feet, their large heads with their wraparound eyes, and the way that they do things is universal. So that's where my main forte with the greys are, and always has been within my research, because I'm fascinated by them, and they do fascinate me because they are a reality.
Oh, it's definitely fascinating. In fact, I've read your Sky Crash book with Brenda. It's a brilliant book. I mean, something that's actually fascinated me was I was hoping you might speak a bit about David Daniels, the reptilian was in it. I found that very, very creepy.
Yeah, I mean, it was true. I mean, all the people that I interviewed, very down to earth, solid people. Met this guy, and they were all scared of him. Brenda wasn't. Well, she's not scared of anyone, bless her.
I know Dot was terrified, wasn't she? Because he turned up on her doorstep.
Well, I mean, it turned out that he'd found himself, in these places, and he wanted to meet with ufologists. I know that he met with Jenny Randalls very briefly, Colonel Wendell Stevens. He was getting to all the people. He was very strange, and I'm absolutely convinced that my brother and Susan and I met him long before that we were involved with Rendlesham, when we, or Brenda, when we'd gone to a pub in Suffolk, and we didn't have anything to drink, which was a bit disappointing, but never mind. So this guy came out, and my brother and Susan said they saw his right arm change to plastic, and he wouldn't leave us alone. And do you know what's really weird? He followed us into the forest, because we were doing a sky watch there with Beams, then British Earth and Aero Mystery Society. And he wouldn't leave us alone. And do you know what, David? I am absolutely convinced that was him. He used the name Joseph. I know some people say, no, you didn't, but why not? I mean, why not? He was a very, and he was a very strange character, and he has been documented. So that is something that's very weird. I think he just messed with everyone's minds. He just was all over the place, yet he could perform these amazing things. So I know that the people in high establishments of power were very interested in him, and then he just went off the radar, just disappeared.
Yeah, I was going to say, we don't know where he went, do we? Apparently.
Well, unless he was in that pub there, not far from Rendlesham. When we'd gone there, I don't know, but it was very bizarre, very strange.
I know Brenda said she never saw him eat anything, and wasn't he living in a caravan outside in her...
Yes, that's right, and he seemed perfect every time, and he had these powers. He could read minds. I mean, he said he's from the Pleiades, and that there was a war, or there's some type of war going on, and he met with some very influential figures within our society. And they took him seriously as well. So that's in Sky Crash. That was all documented in Sky Crash throughout time that Keppelbaum brought out in 2013. That was quite a project to work on. So that was in there, yeah.
I did hear that you didn't do too well out of that book. Apparently, did they? It's not a very easy book to get a hold of, is it? Apparently.
Well, Keppel Band, they published quite a lot of Mind, Body and Spirit books, but very sadly, John Day has passed over, and I think the publishing company is in some form of disarray.
Right.
So I'm still trying to work through another company that's dealing with them to sort this all out. But I'm sure that we'll get that sorted at some point. Yeah.
Yeah, it should be. I think that should be made available again, because it's. I'm sure a lot of people would like to get their hands on a copy.
Yes, that's right. I mean, they can buy it through the site still, Keppel Band. I think they can still get it there, but. I don't quite know what's happening with that publishing company at all at the moment. They were very good. They brought up my other books, but then obviously there's tragedies, and it's I don't know what's happening with it at the moment, David. To be honest with you,
another one of your titles that I find the Ungodly Agenda. What's that?
Oh yes.
What's that all about?
The science fiction novel called The Ungodly Agenda. And we had David Saperstein, the author of Cocoon. They made his book into a Hollywood film.
Right.
David Saperstein, he wrote Cocoon, Metamorphosis, Butterfly, and he's a good friend of ours. He's a professor from New York. But we wrote this book about reptilians who are basically watching the world, and a female heroine gets involved in this satellite program that she doesn't know what it's about, and then she ends up finding out that these aliens that are linked with the secret military elite are after something. They want something on the Earth, and they're looking for it. I won't give too much away.
No,
I think you can still.
But has it got elements of truth within it that you've learnt?
We've been told so, David. Ronald and I have been told so, because that was more Ronald's project than mine.
Right.
I've had a few ideas in there, but there is a lot, I believe, that is truth. And they always say, don't they, the best way to get anything that's fiction, that's truth, is through fiction. Yeah. And sometimes you have to be very careful. But yeah, we weave this idea together, both Ronnie and I, and he poured his heart and soul into it. It had some quite good reviews, I believe. I think it did quite well. Yeah.
Yeah. It sounds an interesting book, I must say. I must try and get hold of a copy myself.
The Ungodly Agenda, yes, that was a piece of work.
So, how do you feel about the disclosure movement? Have you got any thoughts on that? Do you think we're getting any closer to it, or?
I don't think so, David. I really don't. We keep hearing all this disclosure, and I know that, Dr. Stephen Greer tried, and other people, but I'm going to tell you now, there is a wall that's stopping the good public from knowing about this, because I think, if we just look at the political problems we have at the moment and how that's being engineered through Brexit, and how manipulation, lies, deceit, and look what's happening with that. You just tell someone about there's a water shortage, everyone will be out clearing the shelves in Sainsbury's or Tesco's. Right, You tell them there's going to be a petrol shortage, they're going to queue up until you can't get any petrol. Yeah. How will they manage? How on earth will they manage the reality and the acknowledgement that we are being visited by not so much extraterrestrials, but I would call them interdimensionals? That will scare and horrify a lot of people, good people who have been programmed the system's way, whereas people like you and I and many other people are deprogramming ourselves.
Not everyone's sensible like us, are they?
Yeah. And they thought we were the weird ones. I think we need to turn that finger of doubt upon those that reckon that we need to be locked away. I think these people need to be woken up.
Yeah, you do wonder with some people. Yeah, I know. Yeah. It's an interesting subject, I must say.
Yeah, I've always been fascinated by it. I'm after the truth. I'm linked, as you are, with some very brilliant people. I'm very honoured, and I have to say my brother and I are both honoured to be brought into your circle and the other circles of people who are looking for the truth, because that's what we're dealing with. And however crazy it may seem, you kind of like get a feeling of whether or not something's truthful or not, and it's very easy to disseminate that. But to deal with the truth, to look for the truth, to be passionate about the truth. I mean, I spend every day of my life reading and absorbing and thinking and writing, and this is what I like, and that's the truth. I mean, that's the truth, because I'm looking for the truth. Like
we all are. Thank you for saying that. I mean, I appreciate those comments. Like you say, I've been sort of mixed up in something that's been for the last 3 years, but so we won't go into it here.
No, best to remove yourself very gently for the moment from that. We only deal with truth and honesty, and
that's right.
That is what.
The thing is, when that hits you in the face, that lies and things have been told, it does actually hit you pretty hard, you know. And this is why I feel so strongly for Peter, who's been really badly treated through. You know, and he knows how we really feel about his own personal research, and that which is still respected, you know.
Oh, and I don't doubt that at all, and I never have doubted that. And I can tell you, I wouldn't be at all surprised if he picks up his pen and he does another UFO book or something. Well, he's got a lot of information to give out to the masses.
I think he's got a good man. I think he's got one on the go, actually, doing like a history of UFOs, probably. I mean, have you got any advice for people considering, conducting their own sort of research into the UFO field or anything? Or I think my advice would be to don't accept everything as face value. You really do need to look deeply into it.
Yeah, I think, it's like anything. I think if my advice to anyone that's looking into it is believe in what you believe in. And I also feel that you need to go out and you have to do your research. You must research. You can't just take it for face value from a book or from something you've read online or a documentary you've seen. Go and research and then talk to people. Get in touch with people. It's only when you do that you start to put the pieces together. And, the world's had a lot of incredible, very famous UFO encounters that I believe are totally absurd, because no one shouts for so long if there's no basis to it. For Roswell, for instance, I mean, that is an incredible true case. Rendlesham Forest incident, absolutely totally true, with Colonel Charles Holt and his men and Penniston and Burroughs. And I also believe that there's we have the Pascagoula event that happened, that I know Philip Mantle's heavily into. That was another very famous and very well-known case as well. So there are hundreds, if not thousands, of cases that have been investigated, and there are good researchers out there who are digging for the truth. They want the truth. They're going to find it.
Absolutely.
So. Yeah, and that's where I'm not so interested in what happened to me now. That happened. I mean, privately trying to work it out myself, and I still write about it. But my real passion and drive is to get to the real root of what's going on. That's where the real drive is.
Would you like to give a mention about, because you're doing an appearance, aren't you? Shortly, is it July? Wasn't it? Or was it June? No, the end of June. Where I'll be seeing you. And
yes.
If you'd like to put it out there, maybe you can. Other people might like to.
Yeah, you can find out what I'm doing online. I mean, I know it's the end of June sometime, but I'm a bit rubbish with dates, I'm afraid. So
you can find. The date was offhand. I think it's towards the end of June. I think it is.
Yeah. So you can find out online.
I will put a link to it on Paranormal Dimensions page anyway.
Thank you, Dave. That's brilliant. And but my books and the research and you can find out about me on there. And I am working on a new book called You, the Public Deceived, The Grand UFO Deception, which hopefully will be out in 2020. And I'm also halfway through a psychic book called Guardians of the Dead. So I'm
always knocked out by your titles. They all seem to be.
Oh, I know. Yeah, I don't know where they come from. They just pop into my head, and I'm thinking, oh, that sounds like a good one. I think I'll use that one. But I have to thank all of you and all the good researchers who have supported me and my brother Ronald in everything that we do, which is really very warm and lovely, and that really warms the heart. So dealing with truth and honesty, dealing with respect, dealing with integrity, that is what it's all about. And it's about sharing good information and keeping abreast of what's going on around the world, because there's cases probably happening today that we won't get to know about until about 2 or 3 years' time.
Yeah. Well, you and your brother are very warm human beings, and I think that just sort of, you can just, that passion that you both show for the subject, it just emanates out there, and, and I think everyone appreciates it.
Yeah. We're not out to score points. We're not after fame or fortune. We're doing it.
Which is the way it should be, yeah.
And most scholars and researchers and authors are poor. That's fine. I love what I do. And it's the drive that gets you there. That's what it's all about. And the comradeship with all those other good people out there who are really trying to help you and push you forward. It's really wonderful. It's a lovely circle to be in.
It is, yeah. Is that what you like best about this work? I think that's what I like about it. It's meeting all these lovely people. I mean, I don't think I'd have met all these lovely people such as yourself without this subject, you know.
Yeah, and I think social media has helped in some way now, because in the early days you couldn't get hold of anyone. You had to write to them and wait weeks for a reply. So it's given us the ability, and I just hope that the establishment does not in any way try and control that, which they have done with a lot of other things. But that's another subject entirely.
Well, I've met a few horrible ones as well, but we won't go into that.
No. Brilliant. Well done.
Anyway, I'm afraid we've got to leave it there, Philip. And thank you so much for coming on. It's been fascinating. It's been brilliant. I've got Ronald on the next show, like I mentioned. So I'm looking forward to speaking to him, and no doubt you'll get a mention as well. Like I say, we've got links on the page and everything. And so if you want to send me anything that you've got to put me on there, but I'll have a route around and find whatever I can about you anyway. All the dirty stuff that I like to try.
I don't think you'll find much dirty stuff, I'm afraid. I'd love to, but it's sensationalism, but it just won't work with me, I'm afraid.
That's why I say it, because I know I won't find it anyway. Anyway, thanks ever so much for coming on, Philip. It's been fantastic, and I'm looking forward to seeing you soon. Take care of yourself, and
thank you, David.
I'm afraid I've got to leave it there, listeners, and thank you once again for tuning in, and I'll speak to you next time. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you very much, David.
Bye, Philip. Bye-bye. You've been listening to Paranormal Dimensions. I'm David Young, and this is the Paranormal UK Radio Network. Please tune in again next week. Paranormal Dimensions is a regular feature on Mondays on the Paranormal UK Radio Network.